you can't add more shit onto more shit, right? So you have to back up a little bit, increase your abilities as far as from a technical standpoint. That way we can increase the performance after that. So when I took a step back and actually, obviously brought the weight off the bar and started to work on how to fundamentally move this weight the right way. And then I increased my load. And that from that particular way, I increased it tremendously and increased it faster because I actually knew how to move from A to B in the right manner.
Hmm. And that was simply just building a solid platform to be able to produce force and then stabilizing all of the joints throughout the kinetic chain to be able to upregulate force production. I mean,
Exactly.
it's pretty simple, right? Now, something
Yeah,
you talked
it
about.
sounds like it, but some people, they take it into other realms of like, all right, I got to do this, and this. It's really simple when you break it down.
Yeah, 100%, man. And like, I love what you were talking about before about sprinting because I come from a rugby background, I come from a
Mhm.
military background, and I've only been in the combat sports world for a couple of years.
Mhm.
And I've been lucky enough to, be working out of Tiger Muay Thai in
Nice.
Thailand, and I've worked with Peter Yan since he made his UFC debut, and that's
Oh,
because I
nice.
coached a class, and he came up to me, he's like, "Coach, I want to work with you." I had no
Mhm.
fucking idea what I was doing with combat sports athletes, right? But
Yeah.
I started working with him prior to his debut, and now I'm working with a number of high level guys, but
Nice.
that was a massive investment from the start. And I was training a lot of guys for free because, I didn't know anything about combat sports and I was new to the world. I knew strength and conditioning,
Mhm.
but I had to take that knowledge, I had to take those skills, and I had to then apply that to a new sport. I mean, as a strength and conditioning coach, I need to be able to work with any athlete, right? But then I
Yeah.
need to look at the nuances, I need to look at the specifics and, program for specific adaptation to impose demands. And that was a massive investment for me, man. And um, once you put that time, energy, effort into doing those things, like, the results speak for themselves. You build the programs, you build the systems, you build the frameworks, and then you tweak and adjust. And something that I've been doing for years and years is taking the team sports um, components and applying that to an individual sport athlete.
Okay.
About building a culture, having the right people in the right positions, working together. And this is something we'll touch on in a moment. But
Mhm.
I took a lot of skills that I learned from my military career and
Yeah.
my rugby background. Training, rugby athletes, hockey athletes, etc., and then applying them to fighters. And people would be like, "Why the fuck do you have this person sprinting? Why the fuck do you have this person
Mhm.
doing like speed,
Mhm. Yeah.
agility, acceleration, change of direction, center of gravity management, blah, 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 blah?" And I'm like, well, they need to be able to produce force. They need to be able to absorb force. They need to be able to redirect force. It's
Mhm.
all about force production, force absorption, force redirection. If I
Yep.
can get someone to organize their body in a manner that's going to be able to produce the most amount of force possible as fast
Yep.
as possible with the least amount of movement,
Mhm.
whilst maintaining stability, structure, alignment, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're going to be so much more efficient with their movement, their force production. They're going to be able to last longer. And then we throw
Sure.
on top of that some energy system conditioning. We take those skills that we're learning in the strength and conditioning environment, and we then start applying them into their skill based work.
Mhm.
Now we've got a better athlete, and better athletes are going to make better fighters,
Yeah.
generally
Wh
speaking.
what was your background in the military?
I was a sniper. I did 6 years
Oh,
in the
wow.
Australian Army as
Nice.
an infantry soldier, and then specialized and became a sniper. So that's actually something I've spoken about recently with a couple of fighters I've been working with. I did
Mhm.
a postural assessment with my sponsored
Mhm.
fighters at Tiger Muay Thai a couple of days ago, and
Mhm.
I got them pull their shirt off, and I'm like, "All right, have you had any issues here? You had any injuries? Had any injuries here? Blah blah
Mhm.
blah." I'm like, "Contract this muscle for me. Contract this muscle for me." And they're like, "What are you talking about? I can't."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, I can see that you've got imbalances because, of how your body has adjusted. Like,
Yeah.
your left trap is bigger than your right trap, which is then elevating, protracting your scapula. You're probably going to have some issues with your shoulder, your glenohumeral
Sure.
joint. Yeah, I kind of get a little bit locked up when I go into these positions. All right,
Mhm.
sweet. Let's go through some drills so we can start down regulating that and look at the
Mhm.
muscles that are maybe, need to pull the scapula down and back. All right, what about this? Boom, 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 boom. And then we just paint a picture, man. And like, I'm showing these guys this postural assessment, and they're seeing it
Mhm.
on each other, and they're like, "Oh fuck, that makes so much sense."
Yeah, yeah, and that helps with buy-in, right? So I think
100%.
that your military background, it allows you to understand how to systematize any type of program, right? It allows you to be very intricate and detailed, right? Especially being a sniper, you had to be on point, right? So everything that you do comes from evaluating the situation, right?
100%, man. And that to tie into that, it's like my eye is like so finely tuned
Yeah, a
for
keen eye, yeah,
things that are out of the ordinary. So,
yeah,
it kind of it gives me an advantage in some
sure,
areas where I'm really looking at the very minute details. All right, there's a
mhm,
little, we're producing force, we're planting that back foot into the ground to throw that
yeah,
cross or a med ball throw or something like that. But I can
hmm
see that we're leaking energy. Our balance is off, our timing's off, our coordination's a little bit off, which means our accuracy is a little bit off. All right, how can we tighten that up? All right, what we've just done here, I want you to carry that over to your skills based training, see if you can apply that in that chaotic environment. Let's practice,
hmm
let's build the skills in this controlled environment, and then see if you can then take those skills and apply them in an uncontrolled environment.
yeah, yeah. You identifying the minute, finite details are very important. So, like, and you also have to know the sport itself. So
Hmm.
the correlation is very key. And that's where like a lot of the young coaches they miss that, right? They're just looking at, okay, let's squat, let's bench, let's deadlift, let's press, let's pull, whatever. And then they're not really looking at force displacement. They're not looking at compensatory strategies. They're not looking
Hmm.
at, you know, imbalances in general. And so from there, they really are just trying to throw things and see if they stick. But then you ultimately one's gonna one or two things gonna happen. One, you're not gonna get the true benefit of whatever you're doing from a method modality standpoint, and then two, you're gonna ultimately drive them into more compensatory strategy to
Hmm.
help move the weight or whatever they're doing, and then they're gonna end up getting hurt or injured in that particular way. So first thing we got to do is make sure that we're minimizing the risk of injury. So we minimize the risk of injury, that keeps them inside their training. When they keep them inside their training, the skills coaches actually buy into that too as well. So that gets them on your side. So
Hmm.
the whole goal of this whole thing is to obviously increase buy-in, because once they bought into the situation, once they bought into you and what you do as far as from a programming perspective and how you coach, they're going to be more apt to keep coming back. And you know that when consistently progress an athlete, they're going to get where they need to be, and you're going to do your job. So it all comes back to evaluation, understanding the details, and then having the understanding to reframe it so that it can make sense to the athlete, right? And
Hmm.
you, I'm pretty sure you do that pretty well, right? The same thing here is with the background that I have, I'm able to reframe in an optimal manner so that they can say, "Oh man, that makes a lot of sense. Now I see why I'm doing this." And where a
Hmm.
lot of the younger coaches, the coaches that haven't been in the sport or know about the sport or know about the movements inside the sport or know about the bioenergetic demands of the sport, very hard for them to correlate that over. So once they cannot do that, they're like, well, we're just gonna get stronger. And fighters don't care about that, man. Like they're like, oh, let's go grapple then if I need to go get stronger. So you
Yeah.
can't be that basic. You know what I mean? When it comes down to like, I guess bringing or identifying the issue, right, and bringing it to that individual. And so when I can converse with the athlete, fighter, primarily, and tell them what they're doing right here is going to have the direct correlation to whatever their game plan is, or going to combat whatever their opponent's doing, that's where they bought in. And that's where you can obviously keep them for the long haul. And if you can keep them more consistent, you can get more progress out of them.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think something that you spoke about there as well of, speaking the same language as them is so important. And if you've been in the game and if you've been in the cage and you've fought, you can take that knowledge of the movements and what's required, and then you can use um, those same words, that same vocabulary, and then apply that
Yep.
in your strength and conditioning. And this is something that I'm going through at the moment, man. Again, I went through. I come from a rugby background, a military background, but this year I'm really over the last year and a half, I've started doing jujitsu. I've dabbled in boxing,
Mhm.
mixed martial arts, wrestling over the last couple of years whilst I've been at Tiger. But this year is really the year that I'm gonna level up and really focus on the combat sports, martial arts side of things. Like
Mhm,
I love lifting, man. I've been training for 20 years,
mhm,
but I haven't done any lifting for the last 5 or 6 weeks now because this year is like I'm doing jujitsu a couple times a week. I'm doing mixed martial arts once or twice a week, and then boxing once or twice a week as well, depending
oh,
on
wow.
my schedule. So,
Yeah,
I'm really focusing on building my skills because that gives me credibility. And some of
yeah,
the guys like Peter Yan, he flew me to Russia for his fight camp prior to fighting Corey Sandhagen. Was supposed to be Aljamain Sterling, but
yeah,
he flew me to Russia, man, for that camp. And
nice.
all of his boys are over here in Thailand at the moment, going through that fight camp. And I've got
Yeah,
him a couple times a week. I've got those boys a couple times a week, and they see me in the jujitsu session, and they're like, "Oh, coach, very good, very good." And they're always
yeah,
like giving me big ups and like fist bumping me and
yeah,
stuff, man. So gives me credibility, and I earn their respect. You know,
yeah,
and I actually had someone say something the other day. We've got Kamzat Shemaev in camp at the moment. We were doing a sprint session last week, and Tiger put out a social media post, and I ended up jumping in and doing a sprint against him, and shared it on my stories. And one of my mates messaged me, and he goes, "Did that guy just beat Sean Kober?" And I was like, "Nah, bro." He got me. He had me at the start, but I had him covered after 20 meters. And he goes, "I don't think I've seen any of your athletes beat you at anything." And I was like, "Yeah, but when I step into their world, bro, it's a different thing. It's a different
Oh, yeah,
story."
definitely, definitely. It's funny because, like, I'll play around with Dustin a lot, we'll grapple a little bit, and I'm like, "Man, they really just don't know," and it's funny because, like, he does I mean, when it comes to weight training, like, obviously, it's different, right? Grappling strength, weight training strength, it's a little bit different. But when you can manipulate somebody's body, right, and you get a hold of somebody, especially when you have experience in it, you know that they know what they're doing. You can
Mm.
feel it. And so it's always fun, and I'm like, all right, back up. That's enough. That's enough. When he gets a little bit ahead of me, I'm like, all right, that's enough. We're good.
Let's get back to work, bro.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Go do these skater bounds, man. Let's see how that.
Yeah, and then we'll grapple afterwards.
Yeah, for real.